The sound came first. A sharp crack. Skin on skin, loud enough to slice through the soft hum of a first-class cabin that had been built to feel untouchable. For half a second, nobody understood what they had just heard. Then the silence collapsed. A woman gasped. A man swore under his breath. Somewhere near the aisle, a phone camera kept rolling, steady hands, wide eyes. Karen Whitmore's palm was still raised when the pregnant woman's head snapped to the side. Alicia Munro folded back into seat 1A, one hand flying to her cheek, the other instinctively cradling her stomach. Her breath left her in a broken sound, more shock than pain. The cabin lights caught the red blooming across her skin. Not makeup, not shadow, impact. Karen stood rigid in the aisle, 54 years old, navy blazer immaculate, hair sprayed into submission. Her chest rose and fell too fast, like she had just run up a flight of stairs. She swore she still didn't need help climbing. She was being aggressive, Karen said, too quickly. Her voice cut sharp, clipped, practiced. The kind of voice that had ended arguments for decades. She stood up during taxi. "That's not what happened," a man near the window said. Mid-40s, grey at the temples, expensive watch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. She asked for a seatbelt extender. That's all she did. Alicia tried to speak. Nothing came out at first. Her lips trembled. She swallowed hard and tried again. "I just wanted it to sit below my stomach," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm people use when they are trying not to fall apart in public. "I'm 6 months pregnant." Karen's jaw tightened. The word pregnant landed like an accusation instead of a fact. "Ma'am, you were instructed to remain seated," Karen said. Her eyes didn't leave Alicia's face. They didn't soften. Federal regulations are clear. Alicia looked at her. Really looked at her now. Not the uniform. Not the authority. The person behind it. "I didn't raise my voice," she said quietly. "I didn't touch you. I asked for something your airline provides every day." The young man in seat 2A shifted in his seat. Early 20s, messy hair, college sweatshirt. He glanced down at his phone, then back up at the two women. The recording icon blinked red. He didn't lower the phone. A woman across the aisle pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. She hit her. Karen turned on her. "Ma'am, please mind your own business." "My business," the woman shot back, "is that you just slapped a pregnant passenger." The word slapped echoed, heavier each time it moved mouth to mouth. Alicia's breathing changed. Shorter. Shallow. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her dress as if grounding herself. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again. "Something's wrong," she said. Fear finally cracked through the composure. "I'm cramping." That did it. A flight attendant rushed forward from the galley. "Sophie." Late 20s, knew enough that her smile still came easily. It disappeared when she saw Alicia's face. "Ma'am." "Stay with me," Sophie said, kneeling, already breaking protocol because instinct had kicked in. Just breathe. I'm right here. Karen didn't move. She couldn't. Her brain was catching up to her hand. "This is being recorded," the young man said. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. All of it. Karen snapped toward him. "You can't record crew members. You can't assault passengers," he said back, louder now. "That's against the law." The cabin buzzed. Not noise. Electricity. Judgment moving faster than air. Alicia looked up at Karen through wet eyes. "You assaulted me," she said. Not accusing. Stating a fact, she was still trying to understand herself. Karen leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You pushed me," she hissed. "You were out of control." "That's a lie," the man with the grey hair said. "Every single one of us saw it." The captain's voice broke through the intercom, calm but strained. "Flight attendants, report to the cockpit immediately." Karen straightened her jacket. "Muscle memory. Authority is armor." "Sophie, stay with the passenger," she said. "I'll handle this." As she turned, she caught Alicia's eye one last time. For a flicker of a second, something ugly passed between them. Not anger. Not fear. Resentment. The kind that asks a single question and never forgives the answer. "Why are you here?" The plane never left the ground. When the aircraft rolled back to the gate, the mood had changed from shock to certainty. People knew what they had seen. They knew what it meant. 2 Port Authority officers boarded. One tall, one younger. Both stone-faced. "Karen Whitmore," the taller one said. "We need you to come with us." "This is a misunderstanding," Karen said. Her voice sounded different now. Thinner. The passenger was non-compliant. The younger officer glanced at Alicia, pale and shaking. Sophie still crouched beside her. "Ma'am," he said gently. "Are you injured?" Alicia nodded. "I think so." That was enough. Karen was led down the aisle she had commanded for decades. People leaned away from her as she passed. No one met her eyes. In the terminal, phones were already buzzing. The video had escaped containment. It always did. In an ambulance bay outside the airport, Alicia lay back against the stretcher, oxygen mask fogging with each breath. She stared at the ceiling lights sliding past and tried to focus on one thing that wasn't fear. Her phone vibrated in her hand. A name filled the screen. "Michael." She answered on the first ring. "I'm okay," she said, before he could speak. "The baby's heartbeat is strong." But something happened on the plane. There was a pause on the other end. Too long. The kind that meant the world had just tilted. "What happened?" Michael Monroe asked. His voice was calm. Controlled. Dangerous in its restraint. Alicia closed her eyes. "A flight attendant hit me," she said, "because I asked for a seatbelt extender." Silence. Absolute. Then quietly, "Which flight?" 717. Another pause. Shorter this time. "I'm coming," he said. "You're in San Francisco," Alicia said. "You're in meetings." "I'm canceling them," he replied. "No hesitation. I'll be there before morning." As the ambulance doors closed, The young man who had recorded the video watched from across the curb, phone still in his hand. He didn't know Alicia's last name. He didn't know why the station manager had gone white when he heard it. He would soon. Because Karen Whitmore hadn't just struck a pregnant passenger. She had struck the wife of the man who owned the airline, and the story everyone thought they understood had only just begun. Karen Whitmore had been 13 minutes early to work that morning, the way she had been for most of her adult life. Not 12, not 10, 13. It mattered to her, even if no one else noticed. The terminal at JFK was still half asleep when she punched in. The fluorescent lights hummed. A floor buffer whined somewhere down the concourse. Coffee burned in her throat as she took the first sip. Black. No sugar. No cream. She liked it bitter. It matched the hour. Her phone vibrated in the pocket of her blazer. She didn't need to look to know who it was. The timing was too perfect. She waited until she reached the employee lounge, until she had placed her bag down with deliberate care, until she was seated. Control first. Always control. Then she pulled the phone out. A text message from Gerald. Closed on the house yesterday. 7 bedrooms. Ocean view. Claire loves the kitchen. Hope you're doing well. Karen stared at the screen. 54 years old, and she could still feel her jaw tighten the same way it had the day he told her he was leaving. 5 years of marriage. A decade before that of shared holidays, shared friends, shared assumptions about how life was supposed to unfold. All of it replaced by a woman in her late 20s with a soft laugh and a name that sounded like a marketing slogan. Claire. Karen deleted the message. She didn't reply. She never did. She slid the phone back into her pocket like it had burned her. Around her, the lounge filled slowly. A few younger flight attendants drifted in, voices light, laughter easy. One of them, blonde, barely 30, scanned the crew manifest taped to the wall and squealed softly. "I got London," she said. "First class lead." Karen's hand froze around her coffee cup. She looked. Just once. Her eyes moved across the list of names until they landed where she already knew they would. Lead service attendant. Jennifer Blake, age 32. Karen had requested that route for 3 consecutive years. London. Paris rotation. Better hours. Better pay. A private hotel room instead of a shared one. Something to look forward to. Something to mark time. Jennifer had 8 years with the airline. Karen had 22. "Did you hear?" someone said behind her. "Too bright, too cheerful. They said she has fresh energy." Fresh energy. Karen translated the phrase instantly. Younger, prettier, easier to mold, cheaper to promote. She forced a smile when Sophie approached. "Congratulations to her," Karen said. The words tasted wrong in her mouth. "I'm sure she'll do great." Sophie hesitated. She always did around Karen. Everyone did. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You seem tense." Karen turned slowly. Her eyes were calm, her expression professional. "I'm fine," she said. Then sharper, "If you're not assigned to this flight, you should be prepping your cabin." Sophie flushed and nodded, retreating without another word. Karen finished her coffee and stood. She adjusted her blazer, smoothed an imaginary wrinkle. In the mirror above the sink, she studied her reflection. Controlled hair, controlled face, no cracks visible. Good. She had given this airline everything. Birthdays missed, holidays traded, a body permanently trained to function on little sleep and recycled air. She had been polite when passengers were rude, firm when they were drunk, unyielding when safety was on the line. She had kept order in metal tubes, hurtling through the sky at hundreds of miles per hour. And now, suddenly, she was being told she was outdated. She walked to the gate with her chin up. Boarding began on time. Karen stood at the entrance to the first-class cabin, greeting passengers as they stepped aboard. A businessman brushed past without looking at her. She still said, "Welcome aboard." A honeymoon couple laughed their way down the aisle, hands intertwined, oblivious to her existence. She congratulated them anyway. An elderly woman struggled with her carry-on. Karen lifted it into the overhead bin without being asked. The woman squeezed her arm. "You're very kind," she said. Karen felt a flicker of something warm in her chest. It didn't last. Then she saw Alicia. Young, early 30s, natural hair pulled back neatly, calm posture, one hand resting protectively on a visibly pregnant belly. She moved carefully, aware of her body, aware of the space she occupied. The diamond on her left hand caught the light as she checked her boarding pass. Seat 1A. Karen's eyes dropped to the ring, then to the seat number, then back to Alicia's face. Something twisted inside her. Not envy. Not exactly. It was sharper than that. More personal. "Welcome aboard," Karen said. Her voice came out flatter than she intended. Alicia smiled. A warm smile. Open. Unafraid. The kind of smile Karen had once had, before the world taught her better. "Thank you," Alicia said. Karen watched her settle into the private suite at the front of the cabin. The best seat, the most space, the quietest corner. Everything about Alicia's presence felt effortless, like the world had made room for her, without her ever needing to ask. Karen turned away before the feeling could take shape. During final checks, she enforced every rule with precision. Seat backs upright, electronics off, bags stowed. When a man ignored her, she adjusted his seat herself. When a couple kept filming, she cut them off mid-laugh. Authority came easily to her. It always had. When she reached row 1, Alicia was shifting in her seat, adjusting the belt across her hips. Her face showed discomfort she was trying not to advertise. "Is there a problem?" Karen asked. "Yes," Alicia said. "Could I get a seatbelt extender? This one is uncomfortable, and I want to make sure it's positioned safely below my stomach." Karen felt the first real snap inside her. Not the request, the expectation behind it, the assumption that accommodation would follow automatically. "The belt is designed to sit low and tight," Karen said. "You're wearing it correctly." Alicia nodded. "I understand. But for pregnant women, extenders are standard. It reduces pressure on the uterus. Your colleague on my last flight gave me one without any issue." The words "colleague" hit Karen like a slap she hadn't yet thrown. "I am the lead on this flight," Karen said. Her voice sharpened. "Extenders are for passengers who cannot otherwise secure the belt." The implication was deliberate. Karen watched Alicia's face as recognition flickered across it. Then something else. Steel. "I'm a doctor," Alicia said calmly, "and I'm telling you this isn't safe for my baby. Please get me an extender, or the captain." That was the moment. Not the request. Not the pregnancy. The challenge. Karen felt eyes on her. She felt her authority being measured, weighed, found wanting in front of strangers. 22 years collapsed into that instant. All the times she had swallowed her pride. All the times she had followed rules that bent others out of her way. She leaned in. Too close. "I am the authority here," she said, her voice low. "Dangerous. You will sit back. You will be quiet." Alicia stared at her. Shock. Disbelief. Then resolve. She tried to stand. And something in Karen broke. Later, sitting in a holding room with cinder block walls and a metal bench, Karen replayed the moment again and again. The hand, the sound, the look on Alicia's face. She told herself it had been provoked. She told herself the passenger had been disrespectful. She told herself she had only enforced rules. But somewhere, deep beneath the justifications, another truth stirred. One she was not ready to face. She hadn't struck a woman because of safety. She had struck her because she couldn't stand what Alicia represented. And the world, finally, had been watching. Alicia Monroe had always trusted her body. It was the one thing in her life that had never lied to her. Not through medical school, not through 30-hour hospital shifts, not through the slow, careful process of learning how to carry another life inside her own. But as the ambulance pulled away from the terminal, lights flashing against the glass, the trust wavered. The pain wasn't sharp. That was what frightened her. It was dull, spreading, heavy, a tightening deep in her abdomen that came and went without rhythm. Her hand stayed pressed to her stomach, fingers splayed as if she could shield the baby from the chaos she had been dragged into. "Stay with me, Alicia," the paramedic said. Middle-aged. Calm voice. The kind of man who had seen too much to panic now. "Focus on your breathing." She nodded. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way she taught parents in the pediatric cardiac unit when their children were hooked up to machines they didn't understand. Control what you can control. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. Michael. She didn't answer this time. She couldn't talk without her voice breaking, and she refused to let that be the version of herself he heard first. Instead, she stared at the screen, at his name, at the quiet promise of safety it usually carried. Outside, the city blurred past. Concrete, lights, sirens. New York at night, indifferent to individual pain. "Blood pressure's elevated," the paramedic said to his partner. "Fetal heart rate is strong." Strong. The word lodged in Alicia's chest and held there. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Too quickly. Hands guided her onto a bed. Cuffs tightened around her arm. Gel spread cold across her stomach as the monitor picked up the heartbeat. Fast, steady, alive. She exhaled for what felt like the first time since the slap. In a private room down the hall, a nurse adjusted the IV and asked gentle questions. Any prior complications, any bleeding, any trauma to the abdomen? No, Alicia said. Just the impact. And the stress. The nurse's mouth tightened. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. When the door closed, Alicia let herself feel it. The humiliation, the disbelief, the way the flight attendant's eyes had looked through her instead of at her. As if Alicia's presence in that seat had been a mistake someone needed to correct. Her phone buzzed again. Michael didn't wait this time. "I'm in the car," he said the moment she answered. "I saw the video." Her stomach dropped, even as the baby's heartbeat continued its steady thrum. "It's already out." "Yes," he said. "Everywhere." She closed her eyes. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," he said. "No hesitation. No qualifiers. Talk to me." She told him, not the slap. That part was easy. She told him about the look, about the tone, about how small the space had felt when Karen leaned in, about how she had known before the hand moved that something was coming. Michael listened without interrupting. He always did. It was one of the reasons she had married him. Not because he was powerful, not because he built things that lasted, because he knew when to be silent. When she finished, he said, "She thought you didn't belong there." Alicia swallowed. Yes. There it was. The truth neither of them needed to explain. "I'm almost at the airport," he said. "I'll be with you soon." "Michael," she said, "don't do anything reckless." There was a pause, short, controlled. "I won't," he said. Then quieter. "But I will do something." Across the city, in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Market Street, a group of men and women sat frozen around a long table. Laptops open, coffee untouched. A deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars hung suspended in the air. Forgotten. Michael Monroe stood at the head of the table, phone still in his hand, his face unreadable. "We'll take a 10-minute break," someone said carefully. "Michael." "There is no break," he replied. His voice was calm. Too calm. "This meeting is over." A board member frowned. "We're finalizing terms." "My wife was assaulted on one of our planes," Michael said. "While pregnant." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Eyes dropped. "By our employee," he continued, "because she asked for a seatbelt extender." Silence followed. Heavy. Absolute. "I will be in New York within the hour," Michael said. "Cancel everything else. I want legal, operations, and public relations on a call in 30 minutes. "Michael," another voice said, "we need to be careful. Optics." He turned slowly, looked directly at the speaker. "The optics are a pregnant woman being hit by someone wearing our uniform," he said. "There is nothing to manage. There is only something to fix." In the emergency room, Alicia lay staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them to keep her mind from spiraling. The nurse returned with a cup of ice chips. "Doctor will be in shortly," she said. Her tone had changed. Softer, more respectful. Someone had recognized the name on the chart. Alicia hated that. Her sister called from London, then her mother. Then a colleague who had seen the clip on the news and put the pieces together. Each conversation stripped another layer of privacy away. She turned the phone face down. In a holding room at the Port Authority station, Karen Whitmore sat on a hard bench, hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles had gone white. Her blazer lay folded on the table. Without it, she looked smaller, older. A police officer asked her to recount what happened. She told the story she had already rehearsed in her head. Non-compliant passenger, aggressive behavior, safety concern. The officer nodded, but his eyes didn't agree with his face. Outside, reporters gathered, microphones angled toward the doors. The phrase "pregnant passenger assault" scrolled across screens in red. Karen stared at the wall. She told herself this would pass. That seniority mattered. That context mattered. That one mistake could not erase decades of service. She did not yet understand how wrong she was. Back at the hospital, the obstetrician finally arrived, a woman in her 40s, steady hands, direct eyes. "The baby is okay," she said. "Strong heartbeat, no signs of distress." Alicia's eyes filled despite herself. "Thank you." "We're keeping you overnight," the doctor continued. "Stress can do things we don't see immediately." Alicia nodded. She reached for her phone again, hesitating before calling Michael back. "I'm okay," she said when he answered. "They're keeping me here." "I'm 5 minutes away," he replied. She closed her eyes. For the first time since boarding the plane, she let herself feel safe. Outside the hospital, Michael stepped out of a black sedan and into a wall of cameras. He ignored them all. He walked straight through the doors, his focus narrow, his jaw set. The world thought it knew this story. A flight attendant lost her temper. A passenger got hurt. A viral video. A cycle of outrage that would burn bright and fade. They were wrong, because this was no longer about one slap on one flight. This was about power misused, about silence enforced, about who gets to decide who belongs. And Michael Monroe was about to make sure that decision was no longer made in the shadows. By the time Michael Monroe reached the hospital floor, the video had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. It was no longer just circulating. It was detonating. A nurse recognized him instantly, not because of the news, because of the way he moved. Purposeful, controlled. A man used to doors opening before he reached them. "She's in room 412, the nurse said quietly. "She's stable." Michael nodded once and walked down the hall. The lights were dimmed for the night shift, but his presence seemed to sharpen the air. He paused outside the door, took one breath, and then stepped inside. Alicia looked up. Her cheek was faintly bruised now, purple edging in beneath the skin. The monitor beside her bed marked the baby's heartbeat with a steady rhythm. Michael crossed the room in 3 steps and took her hand, careful, reverent, as if grounding himself through her. "I'm here," he said. She let out a sound that was half breath, half release. "I'm sorry you had to see it that way." "I'm not," he said. "I'm sorry it happened." He looked at the bruise. His jaw tightened. Not in anger, in calculation. Outside the room, Phones were lighting up across the country. Morning shows booked emergency segments. Legal analysts debated terminology. Assault, battery, federal aviation violations, civil liability. The phrase pregnant passenger appeared again and again, each time harder to ignore. At the Port Authority station, Karen Whitmore sat alone as the hours dragged past midnight. Her statement had been taken, her fingerprints logged, her phone confiscated. She asked once, quietly, if she could call her union representative. The officer nodded but did not hurry. She stared at the metal table in front of her. Every surface felt foreign without her uniform. She replayed the moment on the plane again, but the details had begun to blur. The look on the woman's face shifted each time she remembered it, sometimes shocked, sometimes defiant, sometimes terrified. Karen preferred the version where it was defiant. A door opened down the hall. Footsteps approached. A man in a dark suit appeared at the threshold of the holding room, flanked by an officer. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. "Karen Whitmore," he said. "I'm David Kaplan, corporate counsel." Relief flared, quick and bright. "Finally," Karen said. "Someone who understands how this works." Kaplan's expression didn't change. "I need you to listen carefully." She straightened. The passenger was aggressive. The video doesn't show everything. "We've seen the video," Kaplan said. "All of it. Multiple angles." Her mouth opened. Closed. "And the witness statements," he continued. "They align." Karen felt the first real tremor of uncertainty. "I have 22 years with this company," she said. "Perfect record." Kaplan nodded slowly. "On paper." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said evenly, "that you are being placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. You are not to speak to the media. You are not to contact the passenger. You are not to represent yourself as an employee of the airline in any capacity." Karen laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "This is absurd." Kaplan met her eyes. "This is serious." "Who is she?" Karen demanded. "Who is that woman?" Kaplan hesitated. "Just a fraction." "Enough. That information will be disclosed at the appropriate time," he said. The hesitation lodged in Karen's chest like a splinter. Back at the hospital, Michael stood at the window of Alicia's room, phone pressed to his ear. The city glowed below, indifferent and relentless. "I want everything," he said into the line. "Every complaint, every transfer request, every internal note that mentions her name." A voice on the other end responded quickly. Too quickly, nervous. "Sir, her record is clean." Michael smiled, humorless. "Records are what we choose to keep," he said. "People leave traces even when systems fail to document them. Find the traces." He ended the call and turned back to Alicia. She watched him, her expression thoughtful. "You're already 3 steps ahead," she said. "I have to be," he replied. "This isn't just about her." Alicia nodded. She understood. She always had. "I don't want this to be about who you are," she said quietly. "I don't want anyone thinking this only matters because of you." Michael crossed back to her bedside. He crouched so they were eye level. "This matters because of who you are," he said. "Not because of me." She searched his face, then nodded. "Okay." In the early hours of the morning, the airline's crisis team assembled on a video call. Faces appeared in squares. Operations, legal, communications, human resources. The mood was tense, brittle. The head of communications spoke first. "The narrative is gaining momentum. Calls for termination. Boycott threats. Legal followed. We're exposed on multiple fronts. Criminal investigation. Civil suit likely." Human resources cleared her throat. "We should note that Ms. Whitmore has had no formal complaints." Michael leaned forward into the camera. "Formal," he repeated. Silence followed. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. His voice was calm, commanding. "We cooperate fully with law enforcement. We do not minimize. We do not deflect. And we do not hide behind seniority." A pause. Then someone asked the question they were all thinking. "Michael," a board member said carefully, "are you comfortable leading this response, given your personal involvement?" Michael held the gaze of the camera. "I am the only person who should be leading it," he said, "because if this company failed my wife, it failed others. And that ends now." The line went quiet. At dawn, Karen Whitmore was released on bail. She stepped out into the cold morning air and froze. Cameras lined the sidewalk, microphones thrust forward. Her name shouted from every direction. "Do you regret your actions? Did you target the passenger? Are you racist?" Karen raised her chin and said nothing. Her lawyer guided her to the waiting car, shielding her from the worst of it. Inside, the door slammed shut, sealing her in with the noise of her own breathing. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice finally betraying her. The lawyer exhaled. "This is bigger than you think." Karen stared out the window as the car pulled away. The city looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. By mid-morning, the airline stock had dropped sharply. Analysts spoke of brand damage, trust erosion, institutional failure. In room 412, Alicia slept for the first time since boarding the plane. Michael sat beside her, unmoving. When she stirred, he took her hand again. "This isn't going away," she murmured. "No," he said. "But it's going somewhere." She opened her eyes. "Where?" Michael looked toward the window, where the first full light of day spilled across the city. "Into the open," he said, "where it should have been all along." And somewhere across town, Karen Whitmore sat alone in her apartment, television flickering with her own name scrolling across the screen, finally beginning to understand that the rules she had relied on her entire life were no longer protecting her. They never had. By noon, the video had become unavoidable. It played silently on screens in airport terminals, in hospital waiting rooms, in office break rooms where people stopped pretending to work. The slap landed again and again, stripped of context and yet heavy with it. A single violent gesture that seemed to speak for something much larger than one woman's hand. Alicia woke to the sound of murmured voices outside her room. Nurses. A security guard now stationed discreetly near the door. She shifted, wincing as the bruise on her cheek pulled, and reached for the call button. Sophie appeared almost immediately, eyes tired, hair pulled back too tightly. "They won't leave you alone," Sophie said softly. "Reporters, lawyers, people who want statements." Alicia nodded. "I know." She looked past Sophie to the hallway, where Michael stood speaking in low tones to a man in a dark suit. Their faces were serious, measured. This was not a husband comforting his wife. This was a leader assembling a response. Sophie followed her gaze. "I've never seen him like that," she said. Alicia didn't answer. She was thinking about the moment on the plane when she had realized the argument wasn't really about a seatbelt. It was about permission. Who was allowed to ask? Who was expected to accept no without question? Michael entered the room and closed the door behind him. He smiled, small and careful. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Alicia said, "but steady." He nodded. "Good." She studied him. "What have you found?" Michael didn't pretend not to understand the question. He pulled a chair closer and sat. "Nothing official," he said. "And that's the problem." He explained slowly. Transfer requests that had never been flagged as complaints. Exit interviews marked vague, sanitized. Patterns that only appeared when someone bothered to look for them. Names of junior crew members who had left abruptly. Passengers who had written emails that were quietly archived and never escalated. Alicia closed her eyes. "So she's been doing this for years." "Yes." "And no one stopped her?" "No." The silence that followed was heavy with shared responsibility. Across the river, in a glass conference room at headquarters, Karen Whitmore's personnel file lay open on a long table. Page after page of commendations. Safety awards. Perfect attendance. Performance reviews praising firmness, professionalism, command presence. Angela Ruiz, head of human resources, rubbed her temples. On paper, she's exemplary. Daniel Price, operations director, didn't look up. On paper is how we've been running this company. Angela glanced at the screen, where a paused frame from the video filled the wall. Karen's face mid-motion, jaw set, eyes hard. How did we miss this? Daniel exhaled. Because we rewarded outcomes, not behavior. Flights on time. No incidents reported. Metrics looked clean. Metrics don't scream, Angela said quietly. In Karen's apartment, the television stayed on even though she wasn't watching it. She sat at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold hours ago. Every few minutes, her phone buzzed. She didn't answer. Former colleagues, distant relatives, unknown numbers. She told herself the storm would pass. It always did. People got angry, then bored. New stories replaced old ones. But when she closed her eyes, she saw the look on the young flight attendant's face as she knelt beside the passenger. Shock. Fear. Something like disgust. Karen opened her eyes and stared at the wall. A knock sounded at her door. Sharp. Official. Her lawyer stood in the hallway, expression grim. "We need to talk." He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. "The airline is cooperating fully," he said. "They're not protecting you. They can't just discard me," Karen said. Her voice cracked despite her effort to control it. "I gave them everything." He met her gaze. "That's not how this is being framed." "How is it being framed? As systemic failure," he said. "And you're the face of it." Karen felt something sink deep in her chest. "Who is she asked again. "Who is that woman?" The lawyer hesitated, then sighed. "Dr. Alicia Monroe," he said. "Pediatric cardiologist, respected, clean reputation." Karen absorbed that. And her husband. The lawyer's eyes hardened. Michael Monroe. The name hit like a delayed impact. Karen knew it. Everyone did. The founder. The man on the safety videos. The voice that welcomed passengers aboard in polished tones. Her laugh came out thin. "Of course," she said. "Of course." Back at the hospital, Alicia received a visit from a detective. He asked careful questions, took notes, didn't rush her. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. Alicia looked at Michael, then back at the detective. "I want accountability," she said. "However that looks." The detective nodded. That's usually where justice starts. As the afternoon wore on, statements were drafted and revised. Words weighed like evidence. Apologies stripped of legal liability. Commitments promised without revealing too much. Michael rejected 3 drafts in a row. "We're not minimizing this," he said. "We're not calling it an unfortunate incident. We're calling it what it is." "And what is that?" the communications director asked carefully. "A failure," Michael said. "On our part." The director blinked. Publicly. "Yes?" Phones buzzed. Emails flew. Somewhere, a board member argued. Somewhere else, a junior employee watched the news and felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation. Validation. In her apartment, Karen finally turned off the television. The silence roared. She walked to the bathroom and stared at her reflection. Without makeup, the lines on her face seemed deeper. Her eyes looked smaller. 22 years, she whispered. 22 years. She thought of the first day she put on the uniform. The pride, the authority, the way people stepped aside when she walked down the aisle. She thought of the last time someone had truly challenged her. She couldn't remember. At sunset, Michael stood before a bank of cameras in a temporary press room. He didn't use notes. He didn't clear his throat. "What happened on Flight 717 was unacceptable," he said. "A pregnant passenger was assaulted by an employee wearing our uniform. That passenger was my wife." The room inhaled as one. "But this is not about me," he continued. "It is about a culture that allowed someone to abuse authority without consequence. That ends now." Questions followed. Sharp, relentless. "Are you firing the employee? Are you being objective? Would this response be the same if the passenger wasn't related to you?" Michael answered each one without flinching. "Yes," he said, "because it should have been this response for anyone." In the hospital room, Alicia watched the broadcast with a mix of exhaustion and clarity. The baby's heartbeat echoed steadily beside her. She placed a hand over her stomach. This was bigger than her bruise, bigger than the fear she had felt in that seat. This was about every time someone had been told to sit down and be quiet. And for the first time, the people who enforced that silence were being forced to listen. The morning after the press conference, the building felt different. Horizon Air headquarters had always been quiet in the early hours, but now the silence carried weight. Security badges beeped more sharply. Conversations dropped the moment someone unfamiliar walked past. People were no longer pretending nothing was wrong. Michael Monroe arrived before sunrise. He didn't take the elevator reserved for executives. He walked through the main lobby, past the wall of awards and framed magazine covers, celebrating growth, innovation, excellence. He stopped once, briefly, in front of a photograph taken years earlier. One plane, one route, one impossible promise. He turned away. In a conference room on the 23rd floor, the evidence waited. Screens lit, files stacked, names highlighted. Angela Ruiz stood near the table, arms folded, her face drawn tight with a mix of fatigue and resolve. "She's on her way," Angela said. Her attorney confirmed. Michael nodded. "Good." Across town, Karen Whitmore dressed carefully. Navy blazer, white blouse, pressed slacks, the uniform of credibility. She moved slowly, deliberately, rehearsing the story she would tell for the 100th time. Aggressive passenger, safety concern, misunderstood moment. She needed them to believe her. Outside the building, protesters had gathered. Not a mob. Not yet. Handwritten signs, quiet fury. Accountability now. Protect passengers. Believe women. Karen kept her eyes forward as security escorted her inside. The elevator ride was silent. Her lawyer stood beside her, shifting his weight. "Say as little as possible," he murmured. "Stick to your statement." Karen nodded. Her palms were damp. The doors opened onto the executive floor. When she stepped into the conference room, her breath caught, not because of the size of it, not because of the screen waiting at the far end, because of who sat at the head of the table. Michael Monroe, not a proxy, not a committee, the man himself. Her legs felt unsteady as she took the chair opposite him. The distance between them stretched, deliberate. Angela sat to Michael's right, legal counsel to his left, a wall of witnesses without speaking. "Ms. Whitmore," Michael said. His voice was calm, polite, almost kind. "Thank you for coming." Karen swallowed. "Of course. I want to give you the opportunity," he continued, "to explain what happened on Flight 717. In your own words." This was it. Her moment. Karen straightened. "The passenger was non-compliant from boarding," she began. "She made repeated demands. She refused to follow safety instructions. During taxi, she stood up in a threatening manner. I acted to protect the cabin." Michael watched her without interrupting. No expression, no reaction. Angela glanced down at her notes. "When did she stand?" Michael asked quietly. Karen hesitated. "During the exchange." "And the exchange began when she asked for a seatbelt extender," he said. "Yes," Karen replied. "But the tone, Michael repeated. "Yes," she said. "She questioned my authority." Michael nodded once. "Let's watch something together." Angela pressed a button. The screen came to life. The video played. From the beginning. Alicia's calm voice, Karen's posture stiffening, the space between them closing, the hissed words, the attempted step back, the hand moving, the slap. The room stayed silent as the image froze on impact. Michael turned back to Karen. "Would you like to revise your statement?" Her mouth opened. No sound came out. "That video," her lawyer said quickly, "does not capture the full context." "It captures enough," Michael said. His voice hardened for the first time. "We also have security footage." Another clip appeared, black and white, overhead, unforgiving. Karen stared at the screen, the truth stripped of angles and excuses. "I didn't know there were cameras," she whispered. "No," Michael said. "You didn't." Angela slid a folder across the table. "These are transfer requests," she said. 11 in the last decade. All citing difficulty working under your supervision. Karen shook her head. "That's not fair. They were inexperienced. They couldn't handle the job." 6 of them left the company entirely, Angela continued. 3 cited emotional distress in exit interviews. Karen laughed, brittle. "People quit all the time." 14 informal passenger complaints, Michael added. Dismissed because none rose to the level of formal reporting. Karen's breathing grew shallow. "I did my job." "You abused your position," Michael said evenly. She looked at him then, really looked. Recognition dawned, slow and terrible. "You're her husband," she said. "Yes." Karen's face drained of color. "You should have treated her with respect regardless," he continued. "But you didn't, because in your mind, some people don't belong where you think they shouldn't be." "That's not true," Karen said, her voice breaking. "I treat everyone the same." Michael leaned forward. "You don't." He stood. The room followed his movement instinctively. "Dr. Alicia Monroe is 6 months pregnant," he said. "She spent the night in the hospital because of you. She is a pediatric cardiologist who spends her days saving children's lives, and you struck her because she asked for a safety accommodation." Karen's shoulders shook. "I made a mistake," she said. "I was under stress." "So were the people you intimidated for years," Michael replied. "So was my wife." He paused. "Let the words settle. Your employment with Horizon Air is terminated effective immediately." Her lawyer began to speak. Michael raised a hand. "We are cooperating fully with the criminal investigation," he said. "We will pursue civil action for damages to this company and to the passenger you assaulted." Karen collapsed back into the chair. The room felt suddenly too large, too bright. "I gave my life to this airline," she whispered. Michael looked at her, not unkindly. "You took too much from it." Security appeared at the door. As Karen was escorted out, employees watched from behind glass walls and open doorways. Some with shock, some with relief, some with quiet satisfaction they did not yet know how to name. Later that afternoon, Alicia sat up in her hospital bed, sunlight warming the room. Michael sat beside her, Exhaustion etched into his face. "It's done," he said. She nodded. "For her. For us," he corrected. "For everyone who never felt safe speaking up." Alicia rested her hand over her stomach. The baby kicked, strong and certain. Outside, the city moved on. But something fundamental had shifted. Power had been named. Silence had been broken. And the cost of pretending had finally come due. The indictment came 3 weeks later, sealed at first, then unsealed with a weight that settled over the city like a second weather system. Assault, reckless endangerment, violation of passenger safety statutes. The language was precise, clinical, impossible to argue away. Karen Whitmore read it alone at her kitchen table. The apartment felt smaller now. The walls closed in where trophies and commendation plaques had once hung. She had taken them down after the termination letter arrived, stacked them in a closet like evidence she wasn't ready to destroy, but no longer wanted to see. 22 years reduced to paper and metal. Her lawyer had warned her. "They're making an example," he said. "This won't be quiet." Nothing about it was quiet. Across the country, former crew members began to speak. Not all at once, one at a time. Carefully. A junior flight attendant who had transferred twice in 1 year without explanation. A gate agent who remembered being warned not to file anything in writing. A passenger who had been humiliated in front of his children and told to sit down and shut up. Patterns emerged, not dramatic, not cinematic, worse, ordinary, repeated, ignored. At Horizon Air headquarters, the phones rang constantly, not with complaints this time, but with statements, reports, stories that had waited years for a door to open. Michael Monroe listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't deflect. He took notes himself, refusing to delegate the hardest parts. Each story added weight to the truth he could no longer deny. Karen Whitmore had not been an anomaly. She had been a symptom. The internal review moved fast, faster than the board was comfortable with. Anonymous reporting systems implemented. Mandatory training rewritten. An independent oversight committee announced before lawyers could dilute the language. This was not damage control. It was excavation. At the hospital, Alicia reached the final weeks of her pregnancy. The bruise on her cheek faded, but something deeper stayed tender. She watched the news coverage less now. She didn't need reminders. Her body carried them. One afternoon, her obstetrician smiled as she adjusted the monitor. "Strong heartbeat," she said. "She's eager." Alicia smiled back, a hand resting on her belly. "So am I." Michael arrived late that evening, jacket draped over his arm. "I spoke to the district attorney," he said quietly. "And they're proceeding aggressively." Alicia nodded. "As they should." He studied her. "Are you ready for what comes next?" She met his gaze. "I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know it." The trial date was set. News vans parked outside the courthouse days in advance. Protesters gathered again, larger now, louder. Some signs demanded punishment. Others demanded change. A few demanded both. Karen arrived early on the first day, escorted through a side entrance. She wore a plain grey suit. No blazer, no insignia. She avoided the cameras, her eyes fixed ahead. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with expectation. Alicia sat in the front row, Michael beside her. She was visibly pregnant now, impossible to ignore. Some eyes softened when they saw her, others hardened. Karen did not look at her. The prosecutor spoke calmly, methodically. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The video spoke. The witnesses spoke. The patterns spoke. When the clip played again, slowed this time, the sound of the slap echoed in the room. Alicia closed her eyes. Michael's hand tightened around hers. Karen stared straight ahead, her face unreadable. The defense argued stress. Burnout, a momentary lapse. They spoke of a career of service, of sacrifices made. They asked the jury to consider context. The jury watched the footage again. Context did not save her. During a recess, Alicia stepped into the hallway for air. A young woman approached hesitantly, airline badge clipped to her jacket. "Dr. Monroe," she said, "I just wanted to say thank you." Alicia tilted her head. "For what?" "For standing there," the woman replied. "For not shrinking." Alicia nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to keep standing." The verdict came on the third day. Guilty on all counts. Karen did not cry. Her shoulders slumped, just slightly, as if something heavy had finally been set down. Her mother wept quietly behind her. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm. Sentencing was scheduled for a later date. Outside the courthouse, microphones surged. Alicia did not stop. Michael did. "This was never about revenge," he said. It was about accountability. That night, Alicia went into labor. It started slowly, a tightening, a pause. Then again, she laughed softly when she realized it. "Of course," she said. "Of course it would be now." Michael drove with one hand gripping the wheel too tightly. "You're okay," he kept saying. "You're okay." "I know," she replied, breathing through it. "She's ready." The delivery room was bright and calm. Machines hummed. Nurses moved with quiet efficiency. Hours passed in waves of pain and focus and release. When the baby finally cried, strong and loud, Alicia sobbed. Michael held their daughter, awe-stripping every word from his vocabulary. She was perfect. Dark hair, strong lungs, a grip that refused to let go. "What do we name her?" he asked. Alicia didn't hesitate. "Hope." Outside, the city carried on. Inside that room, something new began. Days later, Karen Whitmore stood alone in her apartment as the sentencing replayed on the news. Prison time, community service, mandatory counseling. The words blurred together. She turned off the television and sat in silence. For the first time in decades, no one needed anything from her. No aisle to patrol. No authority to enforce. Just time. At Horizon Air, the changes took hold, slowly, unevenly. But they took hold, Complaints were investigated, transfers explained, managers trained to listen instead of dismiss. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was a start. Alicia held hope by the window one morning, sunlight catching her tiny fingers. "The world isn't fair," she whispered, "but it can be better." Hope slept on, unaware of the weight of her name. And somewhere, in a quiet apartment stripped of uniforms and illusions, Karen Whitmore stared at the wall and began, at last, to understand the difference between authority and humanity. The reckoning had come. The question now was what anyone would do with it. Sentencing took place on a grey morning that felt deliberately indifferent to the people gathered beneath its sky. Rain threatened but never arrived, leaving the air heavy and unresolved, like the case itself had been for so many years before it finally broke open. Karen Whitmore stood when the judge entered. She wore a plain navy dress this time, conservative, almost anonymous. Her hands were clasped in front of her, fingers intertwined so tightly the knuckles blanched. She did not look toward the gallery. She did not look toward Alicia. The judge spoke slowly, carefully. Every word measured. The sentence reflected the law, the harm, the pattern. Incarceration, mandatory counseling, community service with organizations serving victims of abuse and discrimination. The gavel came down, solid and final. Karen closed her eyes. In the second row, Alicia held hope against her chest. The baby slept through it all, warm and unaware, her tiny breaths steady. Michael's hand rested on Alicia's knee, grounding, present. When the judge finished, Alicia did not cheer. She did not nod. She simply breathed out. Outside the courthouse, the cameras waited again. Michael stepped forward, shielding Alicia instinctively as flashes went off. "Today was about justice," he said, "not closure. Closure comes later, if it comes at all." A reporter shouted, "Do you forgive her?" Alicia paused. She looked at the microphone, then beyond it. "Forgiveness isn't a requirement for accountability," she said. "And accountability doesn't undo harm. It just prevents more of it." That answer followed them for weeks. Karen entered the correctional facility quietly. No press, no announcement. The uniform she was issued replaced the one she had worn for most of her adult life. Authority stripped to fabric and routine. Days regulated by bells and counts and silence that did not ask permission. At first, she told herself this was temporary, that she would endure it the way she had endured everything else. But the walls were honest in a way she had never been. They did not flatter. They did not bend. In group counseling sessions, she listened to stories she had spent years ignoring. Women who had been dismissed, shouted down, touched without consent, belittled until they believed it was normal. Karen sat stiffly at first, arms crossed, jaw tight. Then one afternoon, a woman across the circle said, "She kept telling me I didn't belong there." The words landed hard, familiar, unavoidable. Karen's throat closed. She did not speak that day, or the next. But she listened. Months passed. Outside, Alicia adjusted to life with a newborn. Sleep came in fragments. Joy did too. Hope grew quickly, alert and curious, her eyes tracking the movement with startling focus. Alicia watched her daughter and felt something steady build beneath the exhaustion. Purpose. Emails arrived daily, from strangers, from people who shared their own stories of flights, workplaces, schools, stories of being silenced, of being told to sit down and accept it. Alicia read them late at night while Hope slept against her shoulder. She didn't respond to all of them. She couldn't. But she kept them, organized them, labeled them. Evidence of a problem larger than one airline, one woman, one slap. Michael watched her from the doorway one night. "You're building something," he said. Alicia nodded. "I don't know what it looks like yet." "You will," he said. "You always do." The foundation began quietly. No gala, no press release, just paperwork, legal filings, meetings with advocates who had been doing the work long before Alicia's name was known. She listened more than she spoke. She learned what helped and what hurt. They named it after Hope. Not because the baby had saved her, but because the future had demanded a different shape. When the first grant went out, Alicia cried. Not because it was large, because it was real. At Horizon Air, training sessions filled conference rooms. New reporting channels opened. Old managers were forced to relearn what authority meant. Some resisted, some left, some stayed and changed. Michael refused to call it a transformation. "It's a correction," he said. "Long overdue." In the facility, Karen completed her programs. Anger management, bias awareness, trauma education. At first, she treated them like hurdles, boxes to check. Over time, they became mirrors she could not look away from. When she was assigned to community service after her release, the placement surprised her. A local center that supported victims of discrimination and harassment. She considered requesting reassignment. Her lawyer advised against it. On her first day, she stood behind a folding table sorting pamphlets. People recognized her. Some stared. Some whispered. One woman said, "I know who you are." And Karen flinched, waiting for the rest. But the woman only said, "You can start by listening." Karen did. She answered phones, filed intake forms, cleaned up after meetings. She did not offer advice. She did not explain herself. She learned names. She learned stories. She learned how much damage could be done without ever raising a hand. One afternoon, a teenager came in, shaking, eyes red. Karen handed her a tissue without speaking, sat with her, stayed until the shaking stopped. That night, Karen cried alone in her apartment, not for herself, for the years she had wasted mistaking control for strength. Alicia received a letter 6 months later, handwritten, careful. It did not ask for forgiveness. It acknowledged harm. It spoke of listening, of learning, of regret without excuses. Alicia did not respond. She wasn't ready. She wasn't sure she ever would be. But she folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, separate from the others. At a small event marking the Foundation's first year, Alicia stood before a modest crowd. No cameras, no headlines, just people who understood why they were there. "This started with violence," she said. "But it doesn't end there. It ends with systems, that no longer protect, harm. Hope slept in the front row, Michael's hand resting lightly on her back. Somewhere across the city, Karen finished another long shift at the center. She locked up, turned off the lights, and stood for a moment in the quiet. She had no illusions of redemption, no expectation of forgiveness. But she had work to do, and for the first time, she understood why that mattered. The story had moved beyond the courtroom. It was no longer about what had been taken. It was about what might still be built. The request arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, buried between grant updates and intake summaries. Alicia almost missed it. The subject line was plain. A name. Karen Whitmore. Alicia stared at the screen longer than she meant to. Her first instinct was to close the email without opening it, to let it sit unanswered like the handwritten letter still tucked away in her drawer. But something held her there, not curiosity, not sympathy, a sense that the story was asking for its final movement. She opened it. The message was careful. No dramatics, no self-pity. Karen wrote about the work she was doing at the community center, about listening, about learning how silence could bruise just as deeply as a slap. She asked for a meeting, not for forgiveness, for accountability, for the chance to say the words out loud, face to face without an audience. Alicia leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. That evening, after Hope was asleep, she told Michael. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He listened the way he always did when the decision was hers. "You don't owe her anything," he said when she finished. "I know," Alicia replied, "but this isn't about owing. It's about closing a door so it stops swinging." Michael nodded slowly. "If you do this, I'm with you." The meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon at the community center. Neutral ground, public building, no press. Alicia arrived early. She wore a simple dress, no makeup beyond what made her look like herself. She wanted no armor between them. Karen was already there. She looked different, not just older, smaller. Her posture was tentative, hands folded on the table in front of her, as if she were trying not to take up space. She stood when Alicia entered, then hesitated, unsure whether to sit or speak. "Thank you for coming," Karen said. Her voice was unsteady. Alicia sat across from her. She didn't smile. She didn't scowl. "I'm here," she said. "That's all I promised." They sat in silence for a moment. The hum of voices in the hallway filtered in, ordinary life continuing just beyond the door. Karen took a breath. "I've practiced this," she said. "But I'm realizing that practice doesn't help when the person you hurt is sitting right in front of you." Alicia watched her. She noticed the way Karen's eyes flicked to her hands, then back up, then away again. The absence of authority was striking. "I am sorry," Karen said. "Not because of the consequences, not because of what I lost. Because of what I did to you, to your child, to the sense of safety you had in that moment." Alicia felt the memory tighten in her chest, the narrow aisle, the heat of proximity, the certainty that something was wrong before it happened. "You decided I didn't belong," Alicia said quietly. Karen flinched. "Yes." The admission hung in the air. "I didn't see a doctor," Karen continued. "I didn't see a pregnant woman trying to get somewhere safely. I saw a challenge. I saw someone I thought needed to be corrected." Alicia leaned forward slightly. "Why?" Karen's eyes filled. "Because I was raised to believe that some people are allowed to take up space and others aren't. Because I had spent years being told I was losing my own place, and I took that fear out on anyone who reminded me of it. The words were ugly. Necessary. I can't undo it," Karen said. "I know that. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to know that I finally understand what I did." Alicia was quiet for a long time. She studied Karen's face, searching for something she couldn't quite name. Excuses were absent. So was expectation. "The hardest part," Alicia said finally, "wasn't the pain. It was the certainty. The certainty that you had already decided who I was before I spoke." Karen nodded. "I did. I've lived with that my whole life," Alicia continued, "in hospitals, in classrooms, in rooms where I was overqualified and still questioned. That day wasn't new. It was just louder." Karen bowed her head. "I was part of that." "Yes," Alicia said, "you were." The honesty felt sharp but clean. They sat with it. "I don't forgive you," Alicia said at last. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." Karen looked up, bracing herself. "But I don't carry hatred for you," Alicia continued. "I won't give you that much space inside me." Karen's breath broke. She pressed her lips together, nodding. "This meeting," Alicia said, standing, "isn't about redemption. It's about truth. You told it. That matters." Karen stood as well. "Thank you for letting me say it." Alicia paused at the door. "What you do next matters more." Karen nodded again. "I know." Outside, Michael waited. He didn't ask questions until they were in the car, moving. "How do you feel?" he asked. Alicia considered it. "Lighter," she said. "Not healed, but lighter." Life moved forward. The foundation grew, quietly at first, then with momentum. Legal aid expanded. Counseling services funded. Partnerships formed with organizations that had been under-supported for decades. Alicia spoke when needed, listened when it mattered more. Hope learned to walk, then to talk. Her laughter filled the house in ways Alicia hadn't known she needed. Karen continued her work at the center. She did not seek recognition. When asked about her past, she did not deflect. She named it. She owned it. She stayed. Months later, a staff member nominated her for an internal award recognizing volunteers who had gone above and beyond. Karen tried to decline. The director insisted. The ceremony was small, local, unpublicized. Alicia was invited, then hesitated. She attended anyway. When Karen's name was called, the room applauded softly. Karen stood, eyes wet, and accepted the plaque with trembling hands. "I don't deserve this," she said, "but I will honor it by continuing the work." Alicia watched from the back of the room. She didn't clap. She didn't need to. She simply observed the arc of a story she had never intended to be part of. now bending toward something resembling meaning. Later that night, she held Hope close and whispered, "You will live in a world that is still unfair." Hope yawned, unconcerned. "But you will also live in a world where silence can be broken," Alicia continued, "where people can change, where harm doesn't get the last word." The story was no longer about a slap. It was about what followed, and what people chose to build from it. Years later, the flight attendant training room looked nothing like it used to. The walls were still white, the chairs still lined up in neat rows, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the rigid quiet of authority waiting to be obeyed. It was the attentive stillness of people being asked to listen. Alicia Munro stood at the front of the room, not as a victim, not as a headline, but as a woman who had learned how easily power could bruise when left unquestioned. She wore a simple blazer, sleeves rolled up, hands relaxed at her sides. No podium, no script. "I'm not here to tell you what you did wrong," she said. "I'm here to show you what happens when no one feels allowed to speak." The faces watching her were younger than she remembered the crew on that flight. Different backgrounds, different stories, but the same uniforms, the same narrow aisles waiting beyond the walls. Michael sat in the back row, out of view, where leadership belonged when change was meant to be real. He watched as Alicia described the moment before the slap. Not the violence, the warning signs, the tightening of space, the shift in tone, the certainty that something had already been decided. "Authority doesn't come from volume," she said. "It comes from restraint." Some people nodded. Others wrote notes. A few swallowed hard. After the session ended, a young attendant approached Alicia, eyes bright and nervous. "Thank you," she said, "for saying what a lot of us feel but don't know how to explain." Alicia smiled gently. "You explain it by stopping it." Outside the building, planes lifted off into clean blue sky. Thousands of passengers boarded each day, now without knowing the story behind the changes they felt. The new policies, the clearer reporting lines, the subtle but important shift in how requests were answered. That was the point. At home, Hope ran barefoot across the living room, laughter spilling behind her. She was older now, curious, unafraid. She stopped short when she saw Alicia watching her. "What?" Hope asked. "Nothing," Alicia said, "just remembering." Hope grinned and ran off again, confident the world would make room for her. Across town, Karen Whitmore locked up the community center after another long evening. The walls were covered now with flyers, resources, handwritten thank you notes. She paused before turning off the lights, taking in the room that had reshaped her more than any sentence ever could. She no longer introduced herself with titles, no longer corrected people mid-sentence. She listened. She learned when to step back. Some days were harder than others. Some nights the memory returned uninvited. But she stayed. Redemption, she had learned, was not a moment. It was repetition. At Horizon Air, the boardroom no longer displayed only growth charts and profit margins. New metrics shared space on the screens: passenger trust, crew well-being, incident follow-through. They were imperfect measurements, but they mattered. Michael stood at the window one evening, watching the city lights flicker on. He thought about the version of leadership he had inherited, the one that prized silence and speed, and the one he was leaving behind. Progress did not come loudly. It came through consistency, through discomfort, through choosing accountability over convenience again and again. The video that started it all still existed somewhere on the internet, buried beneath newer outrage, newer distractions. But its impact had outlived its virality. Not because it was shocking, because it was familiar. Alicia sometimes thought about the moment on the plane when she had almost stayed silent, when it would have been easier to endure discomfort than to assert her right to safety. She thought about how many people made that choice every day, and she thought about what happened when one person didn't. Stories like this are often framed as downfall or revenge or karma. But the truth is quieter and harder. This was not about punishment. It was about interruption. A pattern broken, a system forced to look at itself. Change did not come from a slap. It came from what followed when silence was no longer an option. If this story moved you, let it move beyond the screen. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment "Stand Up."